President Trump saying he is considering 5 candidates now to replace John Bolton as the national security advisor amid speculation that Mike Pompeo could take on that job. In addition to his duties as Secretary of State, here's the president explaining some of the reasons that he let John Bolton go.
He made some very big mistakes when he talked about the Libyan model for Kim Jong-un. That was not a good statement to make, and it set us back. But he's somebody that I actually had a very good relationship with, but he wasn't getting along with people in the administration that I consider very important.
Joining us now, Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, good morning to you.
Good morning, Sandra.
So is it down to 5 still for the president on who he's considering for the job?
That's a fair number, and the president also said in those remarks yesterday, Sandra, that he wishes John Bolton well, and I'd like to echo that sentiment. We should be happy and praising of people who are willing to serve our nation in these capacities. At the same time, the president is the person who got elected, and he should have the team around him that he wants at every level. I believe that Secretary of State Pompeo is doing an excellent job over at State, and that he will, of course, have input into who the next NSC head is as well. But there are many people of diverse backgrounds, all solid candidates. I know firsthand the president is considering for that position.
Anyone that you can name?
No, I won't do that. I've seen names being floated in the press. I think some of those are legitimate and being seriously considered by our commander-in-chief and our president. And he's got many different ways to go. But in the end, it's his foreign policy and national security agenda that needs to be executed and implemented upon. This president's been transparent and successful in terms of communicating directly with the public what he sees as bad actors around the world that should be met with.
I have so much I want to get to here, but within the 5, is Mike Pompeo there? Because there's reports, obviously, that his role could just expand and that he would take over the national security advisor role, and that title would sort of go away and it would fall under his current category as Secretary of State. Is that being considered?
Well, that is something that Presidents Nixon and Ford did with Henry Kissinger, of course. It wouldn't be unprecedented. Under that scenario, I would call that 5+ as the number of candidates. But clearly, Secretary of State has the president's ear and his trust, and has been making great strides in implementing the president's agenda around the globe. And he will continue to be a very important, strong voice here as America's top diplomat.
And that decision, should we expect that by end of week, by tomorrow?
That's the timing and the decision are all the president's, and we'll be ready for that. I think he can't go wrong with a number of these different options that he has.
Well, the Supreme Court has again sided with the administration on asylum, and those Central American migrants have to be denied asylum in another country before coming here. The president views this as a victory. We already heard from him. How big is this?
Well, it's a huge victory. It's the second victory this summer handed by the Supreme Court for the president's vision on border security. Earlier this summer, the Supreme Court, by a vote of 5-4, Sandra, allowed the Pentagon to shift $2.5 billion toward construction of the wall, the border security. Just yesterday, the 7-2 decision, not a squeaker, puts out that this president's asylum law can continue to be executed upon. That's a new change to our system. Essentially, it's a simple one. It says if you're coming here seeking to come into this country, you must first seek safe haven in the countries that you pass through. So the Mexican president has been a terrific partner with this president on trying to make this happen in Mexico. So if you go from one of the, let's just say you're going from one of the Northern Triangle countries through Mexico, stop there and seek asylum, seek safe haven first. So we'll continue to implement that. So that's 2 Supreme Court victories. We have 2 new Republican congressmen in North Carolina because of this president going out there, campaigning for them, giving the closing argument, overperforming in a number of those 7 of the 8 counties from 2018's election, and flipping 2 of those counties. And on top of that, just yesterday, the president got his 150th federal judge. That's huge, 150 federal judges.
You brought up Mexico. Mexico has said that they disagree with this move. They disagree with this decision. Does the president have plans to further talk with Mexico? I know that they say relations are good, but they firmly put out a statement saying this is not something they agree with.
Yeah, so we've been appreciative of many of the positive moves that Mexican government has made under its new president with respect to securing its border as well, with and trying to put a number of their military on the border, a number of their guards, I guess their troops on the border, and helping us to get an immigration policy in this country that works for the entire region. Also, we're very focused on passage of the USMCA. That, of course, is up to Speaker Pelosi to put a vote. They've got the faux impeachment hearings going on, completely ridiculous. There's no appetite among the public. Why doesn't she focus on a vote on the USMCA, which the Mexican government has approved? The Canadian government is ready. The U.S. government is certainly ready. And all those workers in the industries that would be dramatically impacted in a positive fashion are waiting for the USMCA. We also need Mexico's help in keeping the drugs out of our country as well. Many of them are flowing over the southern border.
And now I want to ask you about the gun legislation and the president's proposals. Will we hear from the president by end of day?
You may, because the president is being briefed today. But he also just this week, Sandra, has had calls with Republicans and Democratic lawmakers as they've returned to Washington after a long recess. His staff has been working on this for 7 straight weeks in a bipartisan fashion, where we know that there's an entire amendment committed to protecting legally procured firearms in the hands of law-abiding citizens. There are millions and millions, tens of millions of legal gun owners in this country. At the same time, we're very focused on public safety. I was in a meeting this week here at the White House with our nation's mayors. The mayors of hard-hit cities like Dayton, Ohio, and Parkland, Florida were in that meeting. We are listening to them as well.
So
there are a number of different pieces of legislation. Well, we're looking at
what gun proposals could the president support?
Sure. So there are many different kinds of background checks. This president has done more than most presidents on that insofar as he signed the Fix NICS Act in March 2018. That helps our local law enforcement stop those from procuring guns. There's Lie and Try. That's basically Toomey Coons, Chris Coons of Delaware, big fan of Joe Biden's. We're looking at some of these risk protection orders. Some people call them red flag. With some tweaks, those could work. The president is very focused on mental health. And Sandra, we are very acutely aware that people just shake their heads at some of the fact patterns. How could the kid in Parkland be kept out of the system when he's bragging on social media, surrounded by an arsenal of weaponry, that he'd like to be a school shooter, and the authorities visit his home 32 times? In Dayton, Ohio, the kid has a rape list and a kill list, and yet those juvenile records don't follow him into adulthood. We need to change the system so that those shooters don't have access to firearms.
We believe that by end of day on what he
the president is
support.
very focused on this. He's been working on this every single day.
All right, finally, is the president going to be watching the debate tonight? 10 Democrats on the stage.
Well, tonight the president is flying, he's helicoptering to Baltimore to address the House Republican conference. They're plotting the comeback for 2020 to get the House so that we can get we can get rid of Obamacare altogether and get in its place much better health care to help those 28 million who have no health care. He's going to, I think, double down on the victories he just got in North Carolina due to him going there late in the game. So he'll be flying back while that debate is starting, but we already know what they're going to say. They're going to talk about President Trump. They're going to have no solutions on infrastructure, on firearms, on drug pricing,
leave it there.
on
We covered a
healthcare,
lot,
nothing.
Kelly, and really appreciate it. And we need an on-air button at the White House so that the commotion settles down.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's
Appreciate it,
construction
Kelly.
for the next year, so I'm with you. Thanks.
Appreciate
Take care.
your time. Thank you.